On this episode, I welcome Bastian Dinbarber and Jen Seiden, founder of Zambezi Partners. Okay, can you both introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and where you are located?
Yeah, so my name is Bastiaan, and we're both located in Los Angeles. I was born and raised in the Netherlands, and we are the founders of Zambezi Partners, which is a technology company to help with wildlife conservation in Africa.
And I'm Jenna Seiden. I'm the co-founder as well. Like Bastian said, we are fortunate to be here in Los Angeles. We spend a lot of time though in Africa, and excited to be here. Thanks, Kate.
Awesome. Okay, so how old were you both when you first became interested in conservation?
Yeah, so I mean, in hindsight, as a young boy growing up in the Netherlands, I would disappear in the forests for hours. So I guess that's where it started. And then when I was in my late 20s, I made my first trip to South Africa to Sloe Imfolosi Game Reserve. And after my first safari, I fell in love with Africa, and it was done from there.
I think for me, I had a really interesting childhood. My aunt had a animal rescue, and she started rescuing domestic animals, dogs and cats. But unfortunately, she started to rescue a lot of exotic pets. I remember her first pet. It was an ocelot, and I didn't know what that was. And she started to bring in all these amazing exotic and unfortunately legal animals. And so I was a little kid and started to get very involved in her organization, and that spurred my interest in protecting wildlife. I was probably around 8 years old.
Wow, that's so cool. And Bastian, I can relate because the first time I went on safari, I fell in love, and we've gone ever since. I'm absolutely in love with Africa. So that's great. Okay, so what drives you both to wake up every single day and try to make our planet safer for animals and for humans? Why do you think people take our planet for granted?
My grandparents and my parents were the ones who were building new companies, and all post-war, building new companies, building new economies, building up countries, right? And there was just not this realization how important it is to do that in a balanced way with nature. So everything was consuming, right? Nature was still is to some extent a resource for everything that we humans need. And I think it's really that our generation is starting to understand that we need to balance this out. Otherwise, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for the entire planet, which means it doesn't work for humans either. And I think that realization of not taking the planet for granted is really only happening now, but now it's happening in a big way, which is really good news, right? Um, so yeah, and for me to be able to get up every morning is thinking back about what I saw on every safari over the last 20 years in Africa, and what I learned over the last 12 years or so in conservation. And the fact that the most magnificent wildlife in the world needs us to fix things for them to survive and thrive. That gets me up every morning.
I get up every morning because I have beautiful nieces and nephews that I want to make sure get to enjoy going into the forest like Boss did as a kid, going to Africa like Kate, you got to do. It's really important for me to make sure that we have a place for people to see animals in real life and not just holograms and things that we see what's happening with technology. So that's why I get up in the morning to do what I do.
Yes, it's totally different seeing animals in their natural habitats, and for kids getting to learn about animals and getting to watch them. It's really inspiring. Okay, so now let's talk about the Zambezi project. Can you tell us about the elephant nursery in Zimbabwe and how you help protect the orphan elephants?
So we started Zambezi in the summer of 2018. And then we started talking to our friends about it, and we got introduced to this family in Zimbabwe. So we have conservation partners there, Wildest Life, and they've been rescuing elephants for decades already. And they're based in Harare in Zimbabwe, and they've rescued about 30 elephants so far already. And then when they were rescuing them, at some point they wanted to do the the most beautiful thing of it all, which is actually putting them back in the wild. So then they started a project on the other side of the country, the other side of Zimbabwe, very close to Botswana and Victoria Falls, and that's where they bring the elephants towards you for slowly exposing them to wild elephants in the wild savannah, and some of them have actually gone back in the wild, and that's how the rewilding process works. And it takes years, of course, because first they have to be rescued, brought back to health, then they create new family bonds in the nursery, and then they take a whole new family. They just brought six of them as a family from Harare to Bandamisui, and they just started their rewilding program. And there are currently 15 elephants in the rewilding program, ready to become wild elephants again.
And so the Zambezi project is our collaboration with Wild is Life, where we support them in any way we can, ideally with technology to enable them to identify the right tools and products such as infrared cameras and acoustic sensors and anything that they need to really help in the process of protecting the elephants, as well as when they're out in the wild, hopefully, tracking them. So that's what Zambezi project is, when we get to work with that amazing family that runs Wild is Life.
Wow. And going back to the technology that you have, can you guys talk about the Spy Center and where the data goes to be analyzed?
Should we tell her? Should we tell her about the Spy Center?
We can tell her about the Spy Center,
Can't
not
tell her
exactly what happens,
everything.
everything that happens inside the
We'll tell
Spy
her a
Center.
little bit.
Yeah, so the Spy Center is where everything comes together. So Jenna mentioned all these different sensors that we put out there. So there's sensors that listen to sounds. There's the camera traps. You've had a session with Eric, of course, from Resolve, who has one of the smartest cameras out there,
And Fatima with her drones.
and Fatma with her drones.
Mhm.
So we'll have aerial footage and aerial material, and all of that information comes together in the control room. And the control room is really the kind of the spy center, right? That's where we see it's highly secure. Only a few people get to go inside there. There are the screens all over the walls, where they see everything that moves, literally where the cars are, where the rangers are, where the elephants with collars are. If there is a camera trap that senses, right, from Eric, when it senses well, that camera thinks there may be a poacher, it will send a signal, and then the rangers get deployed, right? And that's where it becomes secret. Um, and at the same time, we have these former special forces men in the United Kingdom that are monitoring everything to make sure that everything is up and running at all times.
Wow. I mean, talk about how technology is saving animals. I mean, this technology is keeping so many animals safe. I can just imagine that room with all of that technology. That is so amazing. Your elephants have a very good life there.
In a very safe life.
So, have you been successful in rewilding the elephants, and how does your technology track and keep them safe?
Wild is Life has had some successes, about two or three that they've gotten out into the wild, and it's been wonderful to see. What happens is when they bring the elephants into the pens over in the western side of the country, they slowly start to make their way out of the fencing and into the wild. And sometimes those elephants find new friends in the wild, and they don't come back. So that's been wonderful in seeing that happen. We are doing what a lot of these reserves do, applying the technology to hopefully make sure that they stay secure. So Wild is Life and a lot of the other reserves in sub-Saharan Africa sometimes put smart collars on the rescued elephants so they're able to track them in the spy center and make sure that they know where they are at all times. There are cybersecurity elements from towers that are perched all around the property as well. So Wild is Life and so many of these other properties are in their rewilding, whether it's rhinos and whether bringing them back or whether it's elephants. We're all using sort of a wonderful stack, as we call it, of technology to make sure that we know where they are and we are protecting them from threats, as you well know.
Wow. That's really cool, and I think your elephants are definitely really safe, and it's so great that you rewild them and rescue, rehabilitate, and release. Perfect. Okay, so now, why are fenceless corridors between national parks so important, and how's your work monitoring these corridors and keeping animals safe?
Yeah. Um, so the brief answer is that animals don't know countries, right? They are not citizens of a country like we are. And a long time ago, we humans just took a map and draw straight lines over it and said, this is country A and this is country B, and you live there and you live there. But for the elephants, that was always, they have their own biodiversity, their own range, where they migrate through on typically on an annual
Hmm.
basis. And there's only one fully intact annual migration that happens every year, which is in the Serengeti, as you probably very well know. And they go through the Serengeti is in Tanzania, and they hop a little bit into Kenya in the Masai Mara. And if there were fences like border fences between Kenya and Tanzania, it would break up their natural migration. Now that is almost a perfect annual migration. But if you look at where we are with Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, all of those countries together form something that's the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Area, a mouthful. But that is really a collection of protected areas that together form the land that large mammals use to migrate on an annual basis. So elephants travel often all of those five countries on an annual basis. Now imagine if there were fences everywhere in between. They would be blocked off everywhere, right? And they wouldn't be able to do the natural migration, which means they wouldn't be able to follow the green pastures, right? Because one area gets really dry in the summer, so they go somewhere else. Well, if they couldn't do that, they would be stuck in a dry area and they would probably die from hunger, right? So that's why it's really important that the animals are able to roam large areas so they can always find food.
And it's important to keep it fenceless because we want to keep it as natural and authentic to the environment that they're used to. But we also have the communities that live right on the borders of a lot of these beautiful areas. And we don't want to fence anybody out or fence anybody in. So to us, having fenceless borders protects everybody, ironically, than having fences.
Well, that's a good point. The whole purpose of our technology is to not be what's called invasive. So
Right.
we don't want to bother the animals too much. We want to bother the people that shouldn't be there.
Right.
Okay?
Yes, I totally agree with you guys that fenceless areas are a lot better, and it can keep humans living in that area safe and the animals living in that area safe. So that's great. Okay, so now let's switch gears a bit and let's talk about platform zero. So it's very clear that zero is your favorite number, and can you tell us why the number zero is so important to the Zambezi partners?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, zero is a very important number because what we talked about in the beginning, like everything that our prior generations have done to build companies and countries and everything was very consuming of the planet. And now we need to get to a point where there's zero poaching, zero illegal wildlife trade, zero carbon emissions, and pretty much zero everything of all the bad things, right? So
Mhm.
that's why the number zero is the magic number. So there was a logical name to slap on our platform because our platform is intended to help everything that is sustainability related to get to that point of zero.
Yeah, so Platform Zero is technically it's an IoT, an Internet of Things platform. And all that means is that it brings together all of those sensors that we talked about. It brings together all of that data into one sort of secret place in the cloud that we can control all of that information and use it intelligently so that we know how this camera relates to that drone and that they can really provide really successful and effective results in protecting the animals. So Platform Zero takes advantage of our favorite number zero, and that's our product.
Do you think it's possible to achieve zero poaching in my lifetime? What needs to happen? What can my generation do?
Yeah. So it's our mission is to achieve zero poaching in our lifetime. Now we're a couple of times your age, so we see each other, we see ourselves and our generation more as a how do you call it, as a bridge, as building the foundation for your generation to keep doing all the right things, right? Because we talked about the previous generations built all these things that now need to be brought in harmony with the planet. So we are basically doing sort of Yeah, you can think about it as a gigantic wheel, and you have a small steering wheel on it. So if you want to move the big wheel, you need to move. It moves very slowly. So we're trying to make that wheel move now. And when it's in the right direction, we need you and everybody in your generation to jump on it and keep running it. Right?
Well, everything, Pete, you're already doing is exactly what we'd advocate. I mean, you're out there telling people and you're telling your friends how to get involved, what to do. So we think your generation needs to, join local organizations and get involved in their local community. We think it's important to start studying um, computer science and a lot of all the other STEM fields, coding, which I know you do a lot of advocating about. And we think it's also important, like you said, to actually visit when you can. If you can get to Africa or get into the forest, get into those places that really need our help, because you can't really imagine it until you're there to see the beauty and the potential of all of it. So it's education and advocacy. It's everything that you're doing, and if you can just pick up what we leave off, we know that we can stop a lot of these bad things happening.
So, and I think this is really important because my generation really has to step up now because in 10 years we won't have any elephants. So, it's really important for my generation to take action right now. Okay, so now let's talk about the illegal wildlife trade. Can you explain in your own words what the illegal wildlife trade is and how we can reach the number zero when it comes to this complicated web of illegal and dangerous activity?
Yes, so illegal wildlife trade, it actually, there are three parts to it. One is the demand, right? The people wanting ivory and rhino horn and pangolin scales. And then there is the trade that sits in the middle, which is all illegal. And then there is the supply, which is the poaching, right? So we need to tackle all three problems, right? We need to mostly educate people in Asia, where most of the demand is from, that there is no value in ivory and that every piece of ivory kills an elephant. That there's no value whatsoever in rhino horn. There's no benefits to it whatsoever, and that every piece of rhino horn kills a rhino, and that we have very few left. And surprisingly, a lot of people in Asia don't even know that, right? So that's a big issue. And then the the trade in between, you have to imagine that you know the demand in Asia. That means that piece of ivory often has traveled the whole world on ships and airplanes and all kind of stuff illegally, while it came from somewhere in Central Africa. So there's a lot of pieces in between where we have a chance to find out what's going on, intercept it, and stop it. And then the third thing is the poaching itself, which is why we're using all this advanced technology in Africa itself to make sure there can't be any poaching at all. And we basically just stop the demand, sorry, the supply side of the whole story. So it's really about those three components that make up illegal wildlife trade, and we need to stop all three of them.
Wow, and this made me think of something. It's really important to reach to the other side of the world. And there's this thing on planes right before you take off, there's a video of a kid telling everyone in the audience that he wants to grow up to be an animal advocate, and there are poachers like in the audience, and it changes them. And I think because over when it plays on all the other side of the world, I think that can make a real big difference, and kids can really make an impact on people's choices, and I think that's a really cool way that somebody came up with, and I hope it's helping. And now, okay, can you talk about the fifth industrial revolution? And this sounds really serious and really exciting. So, what is it?
Yeah. So it is the fifth industrial revolution because it's the fifth one, right? So the first one was well beyond us, before us, were steam engines, right? Big machines like steam trains and all of that. And then came electricity,
Mass production, yeah. Hmm.
and then we had computers, right, in the 80s. Like we grew up with actual bulky computers, right? Now we all have laptops and small and fancy stuff, and we have phones in our pockets that are way more powerful than our computers were at the time. Um, and so the computers were the third, and the fourth is robotics, Internet of Things, cloud computing, augmented reality, virtual reality, all of those things. Now, the fourth industrial revolution was still about just those technologies for very professional industrial applications. The fifth industrial revolution is where it gets kind of perfect because it's all about applying those technologies for the benefit of the planet and humanity. So now it's all about using the technologies for doing something good.
Wow. Fifth Industrial. I never have ever heard of this, so this sounds really cool, and I've never thought about it like that. Okay, so now, my last question. Do you think my generation can turn our planet around? What needs to happen to prepare kids my age in terms of our education, our experiences, and our knowledge with technology?
It's what we said before. We absolutely know you will help turn things around. So we're very excited for what you're doing and the momentum that you're building. And it goes back to education on the ground in schools, whether it's a professional pursuit or it's just a passion. It's just really important. And like Boss explained with the fifth industrial revolution, it's about using all these new cool technologies and finding ways to apply them for good and use them to help with ways to do better farming, right? Ways to, you know, stop crimes in cities, right? All these technologies are positive things and we need to trust them. So I think the more that your generation can embrace these technologies and learn how to code for them and apply them and be on the ground, there's every bit of confidence in both of us that you will, your generation will leave the planet a better place for even generations to come. And then hopefully they can find some new problems to solve.
Yeah, because think about it, like we grew up in a whole different world and then chose an education and a profession to then at some point, like
Mm.
for me in my late 20s and you
Mhm.
came on a little bit later
Yeah.
into this, and to then find out that we need to change and now we have to turn a kind of career around and life around. Well, your generation, it can be
It's
made
built in.
aware. Well, yeah, you learn about it now. You
Hmm.
still have a
Yeah.
couple of years until you choose your studies. You can already choose your studies towards the goal. Then you can choose a profession towards this goal, and you can spend your whole lifetime doing good.
Definitely. Okay, before we sign off, where can kids and teens go to find more about your amazing projects in Zambezi?
Yeah, so our website is www.zambezipartners.com and www.wildislife.org.
Awesome. Okay, we have all those links below. Jenna, Bastian, thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Kate. It was absolutely wonderful, and looking forward to doing a lot of good work together.
Thank you, Kate.
Let's go! Kids can't save animals. Oh, yeah. Kids can't save animals. Advocacy has no age limit.